So let's get into this South Carolina preview. As I mentioned, we're going to break down South Carolina, and this is the home game following a loss, right? So immediately when you lose a game, and this is not something that Alabama fans are super, used to, but the question then is what happens with the energy that's harnessed after the loss, right? Because after a loss, what happens is inevitably people start pointing fingers. Fingers will be pointed at culture, fingers will be pointed at play calling, fingers will be pointed at your coach wearing a t-shirt, even though it doesn't matter. Uh, fingers get pointed at kind of every little thing, following a loss, and it's just nitpicking, trying to see what caused the issue, right? And this is, again, not something that Alabama is super familiar with, but it's definitely something that happens all the time. So the question now is, how does the team as well as the coaches respond, right? The coaches have responded. They had their press conference, and Kane Womack and Nick Sheridan as well as Coach DeBoer talked about, the game after they had watched the film, and it also talked about, just stood for their play calling and the decision making during that game, right? Some of the big takeaways that I took away from the game, want to address the Malachi Moore piece up front. By the sounds of it, exactly what I mentioned is what's going to happen. He's not going to be suspended or anything like that. He's made his apology public. He's done other things privately and internal with the team, and it sounds like it's going to be handled internally, but he's taking accountability for his actions. That's what I expected to happen, and that's what's happening. This is a leader on the team. This is a captain on the team. As DeBoer puts it, this is somebody that supported DeBoer and Womack and staff as soon as they got on campus, right? So DeBoer kind of understands where Malachi is coming from, right, in his frustration, but also understands that this is somebody that has never wavered in his support of Kalen DeBoer, right? This is somebody that's never wavered in his support of Kane Womack. So it's not a situation where he was showing out and is a troublemaker, right? This is somebody that generally is a very good person on the team. And with that, he's earned himself some goodwill. And so, of course, because of that, he's apologized. They're going to handle it internally. He did put out a public statement as well, but, all is done on that front. I've seen a couple of messages, that were put out by Damian Harris and a couple of others. I understood where they were coming from, but I don't completely agree. It did sound like some other guys have reached out to him privately and discussed and kind of let him know what their thoughts on the matter were. But all in all, it sounds like this is being handled in a way that kind of exactly what I expected. Then Womack was asked some questions about defensive adjustments, and by the sounds of it, there were changes as it related to leverage and changes as it related to other things, but he really felt like some of the issues were the wrinkles that were happening on third down. And it was something that, I mentioned in the breakdown of that Vandy preview, that Vandy recap, was I felt like there were changes that had happened in that second half, right? I noticed there was something happening better about the defense. And he attributed it to what was happening on first and second down, right? However, the issue came in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, and Vandy just continuously, converted those third downs. A lot of that had to do with execution. Obviously some of it's going to have to do with play calling. But it was a situation, that's kind of what he attributed to, is that, obviously they did make changes. But so did Vandy, right? And it was just a good play calling effort from their point, and that's kind of what it is to do with it. Nick Sheridan was, of course, a little hard on himself. In my opinion, I thought that all in all, the Alabama offense did not play bad, right? I do not consider that loss to be on the offense. If anything, you could call that loss kind of on a coaching standpoint from the penalty or some other things. But he was, very tough on himself that they had 4 drives that did not end in points, with the 2 punts as well as the fumble and the interception. I completely understood where he came from on that, but all in all, I think that the offense by and large did a good job. It sounded like a lot of the reason why the rushing game maybe there weren't quite as many touches in the rushing game and Jalen didn't have as many quarterback runs in this game was just because the time frame did not line up with how it was expected to, right? We were so behind the sticks and the offense was pressing a little bit that it influenced some of the play calls. And that was how Sheridan kind of said it, was that, when you're playing from behind, some of the play calls are a little different. And, I think that definitely showed up in the film. So that's what was talked about in terms of the coaches. Now we go to the players, right? The question is, how do the players respond to a loss? And in my opinion, what you want to see is assignments, right? Playing assignment football. Because what you don't want to see happen is you lose a game, and then the beginning of the next game, you're doing too much, right? If players feels like they have to do too much, that's when mistakes end up happening, right? If you have your quarterback, let's say Milroe thinks he's got to do too much, then he starts scrambling around and not trusting his progressions, right? If you have a running back, he gets a little loose with the ball, he fumbles, right? Whatever it is, right? Whatever position, what you don't want to have happen is you don't want the players to feel like, I lost this game because I wasn't pressing, or I wasn't doing this, or I wasn't doing that, right? Obviously, do your job, right? Do your job and do it correctly. However, do just your job, right? Do what it takes at your best to win the game, right? And have your teammates do the same, but don't think you need to do your teammate's job, right? Because everyone has to play as a team to win the game. And that's what I don't want to see early in this South Carolina game, right? You don't want to see a situation where the team feels like you're down 100-0, right? At the end of the day, you lost a game. It happens. And it's okay, right? The playoff is still not out of the picture. The SEC championship is still not out of the picture. Nothing is out of the picture of this Alabama football team. All of your goals that you set forth through the season are still achievable, right? The SEC championship and the national championship are still both achievable. Just do your job and play to the best of your ability and go achieve them, right? And that's the big thing for this game, is making sure that the players are just executing the game plan and not trying to do too much. Obviously, the coaches are saying what needs to be said, and it sounds like that's happening. But we have to see it on the field, right? That's not something that I am going to take the coach's word at. I need to see it specifically on the field, because what I don't want to see is a punt returner trying to, he's actually about to get hit, and instead he tries to go for the home run ball, and instead he miscatches it and he fumbles, right? That's somebody trying to do too much, right? If in the moment you should fair catch it, then fair catch the ball, right? If in the moment it makes sense for you to fall down, then fall down. If it makes sense for you to run with it, right? Whatever the moment calls for, do that, but don't try to do more. So now we go to South Carolina, and what is South Carolina going to throw at you? So South Carolina is a well-coached team, right? They are coached by Shane Beamer, son of Frank Beamer, longtime Virginia Tech head coach. And, he's kind of predicated himself on defense and special teams. That is what the Beamers were kind of known for, Beamer ball. And, South Carolina definitely tries to do this. All in all, their defense is slightly better than their offense. It's a situation where South Carolina is a good team. I would not say a very good team, but they are a good team. They dominated Kentucky, a Kentucky team that took Georgia down to the wire. They then just got dominated by Ole Miss, right? So it is a team that has some ups and downs. A lot of that has to do with their starting quarterback. Their starting quarterback, Lenoris Sellers, is a freshman, and he was injured in the LSU game, at the end of the LSU game, and then did not play against in the Akron game. They had a bye week, and then did end up playing last game against Ole Miss. He is kind of their do-everything. In every game that he's played this season, he led them in passing and rushing. In the one game that he didn't play, Robbie Ashford, you guys may know from Auburn, replaced him. Ashford also led South Carolina in passing and rushing, right? So from the way that this offensive scheme is set up, a ton of emphasis is placed on the quarterback. The quarterback is by far the most important position in this offense. All passing plays, obviously, are going to run through the quarterback. Most rushing plays are going to go through the quarterback. Sanders has games rushing of 88 against Old Dominion, 54 against Kentucky, 143 against LSU, and then 55 this last game against Ole Miss, right? He is somebody that definitely has that's going to run the ball a good bit. In those games, let's make sure, had 22 attempts against Old Dominion, had 8 attempts against Kentucky, 10 against LSU, and 15 against Ole Miss, right? So he definitely is not afraid to run the ball. And then passing, he had 32 attempts against Ole Miss, had just 16 attempts against LSU. Right, so this is somebody that isn't going to throw the outside of that Ole Miss game. He doesn't have another game, over 16 attempts in conference. The highest outside of that was 23 attempts against Old Dominion. Right, so this is not an air raid system by any stretch of the imagination. This is not a team that is going to air it out with LaNorris Sellers. That is not his game plan. He is somebody that you can intercept, that you can get in his head a little bit. And that's what I expect Kane Wommack to try to do in this game, right? He talks a lot about the vision defense. He talks about having eyes on the quarterback and be able to create takeaways. In my opinion, that is one of the keys to this game, to show the defense that they are capable of turning people over, that they are capable of enforcing their will. Sellers has been picked off in every SEC game this year. The only game he didn't get intercepted was in his Old Dominion game, right? So I think this is a huge opportunity in this game, is that I think LaNorris Sellers is somebody, especially you're playing a freshman quarterback, you're playing a quarterback that is definitely a better athlete than he is a passer. And I think that that's something Alabama has to take advantage of, right? Alabama, this is a team that I don't think is going to take advantage of the scheme that Alabama runs in the same way that Vanderbilt did, right? Vanderbilt was running large, like multi-tight end, running back, fullback style sets. That's not what South Carolina is going to do, right? South Carolina is not going to run those type of sets, and Alabama's 5 defensive backs that are on the field at once are definitely going to be a benefit in this game versus being the detriment that they slightly were in that Vanderbilt game, right? So I think scheme-wise, I think Alabama and Alabama and South Carolina match up actually very well, because the scheme that South Carolina runs is not a scheme that causes as many issues with Alabama's personnel, right? From a personnel standpoint, we talked about how Vandy did things much differently than what you were going to see for the rest of the year, because they were the real option team that you face. South Carolina is not that option team, right? They definitely run with the quarterback. The quarterback definitely is the key player in this system, but it's not in the same way that Pavia was, right? They definitely need Sellers to play well to win the game, as most teams need their quarterback to play well. But again, it's not the same way. They aren't asking him to do the same types of things that Vandy was. So in that way, I think that Alabama has a very good chance to be successful in this game. And I think a lot of that is predicated on their ability to confuse LaNorris Sellers, to have bodies on him, and to make him beat them with his arm, right? Do not let him beat you with his legs. Make him beat you with his arm, because he has not shown that ability to beat you with his arm. His best game passing was not terrible. It was 10 of 14 for 166 yards. He did have an interception in that game. So of his 4 incompletions, one of them was an interception. He did throw two touchdowns in that game. But this is also a game that again, his highest QBR on the season is 67, right? Again, this is not a quarterback that is going to beat you with his arm. Make him do it, right? Make him show you he can beat you with his arm. And I think that is how you have to talk about South Carolina from an offensive standpoint. When you're talking about South Carolina, however, from a defensive standpoint, and let me pull it up just so that I can make sure I get his A, name correct, and B, have his stats correct. They have a player currently on the defensive end. Yeah. So they have a freshman defensive end named Dylan Stewart that is 6'6", 248, has 3.5 sacks on the year, and is an absolute wrecking ball. They have another in Kyle Kennard that is a senior, has 5.5 sacks, technically has more sacks than Stewart. But Stewart is one of those guys that if you're watching tape or watching, South Carolina play, especially in like that Kentucky game, he took over, right? He absolutely took over and demolished Kentucky's tackles, right? I'm not saying that South Carolina is going to have the best defensive ends you faced. You could argue Georgia had better defensive ends, right? But this is a game that you are going to need quality play out of your offensive line because South Carolina is definitely capable of getting to the quarterback, right? If I was to say something that South Carolina does better than other teams, getting to the quarterback is that, right? They have 15 sacks on the year. They compare that to just they have 6 interceptions on the season. They have 4 fumbles recovered on the season, right? This is a team that definitely plays solid defense, right? This is a team that is going to try to wreak havoc on the defensive end, and I think it really starts with their defensive ends, right? I think it starts with the freshman edge Dylan Stewart, and I think that all in all, that is what this team is going to try to do. Is they're going to try to wreak havoc on your quarterback from the defensive end's perspective, right? They're going to try to cause as much pressure as they can, as any team does. And I think that they're a little bit more successful at it than others, right? You saw that in the Kentucky game, and that is not a bad offensive line. I wouldn't call it an elite offensive line, but Kentucky is definitely not a bad offensive line. You saw Ole Miss have some success and not have as many issues with it. That is, I think, part of what you want to watch for when Alabama has the ball is how much time does Jalen have to throw the ball? Because I think the system that we run, we are going to be able to scheme guys open, right? I think that Nick Sheridan and Kalen DeBoer have proven as offensive coaches that they are able to scheme guys open. Even in the Vandy game, right, Alabama wasn't playing well. When they needed a play, they got one, right? I believe in Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan's ability to scheme guys open and to call the plays that will put people in the best position. In my opinion, the games in which we're having the most issues, right, and we have not had them recently, but early in the season, you had the most issues when Jalen had very little time to process and throw the ball. If they can keep the tackles, keep the healthy offensive line and have Proctor and Pritchett stay healthy, I think that Alabama will have some success on the offensive end of the ball, right? What you don't want this to turn into is a shootout. That's what happened in the LSU game for South Carolina versus LSU. That's what you want to avoid with this game. I think if you can avoid the shootout and make LaNorris Sellers have to beat you with his arm, I think you can have a lot of success in this game. I think that's the key to victory, right? The key to victory is make LaNorris Sellers beat you with his arm. Give Jalen time to throw, right? Even if you have to call in a few extra max protections, right? Keep a running back into chip, keep a tight end into chip. Make sure that the line can hold their own. If that happens, there's nobody really on the back end of South Carolina's defense that truly, truly scares me, right? The people that scare me the most about South Carolina, in my opinion, is their um, their defensive ends. They do have one defensive back that has 3 pass deflections and 2 interceptions, right? Jalen Kilgore is a good DB, right? They have solid DBs, but I still don't think he truly scares me, right? The only people that I could look at truly being able to take over the game is the Dylan Stewart freshman I was talking about, right? That's one that truly, when I look at, can you take over the game? That answer is a yes, right? That Kyle Kennard, the answer is a yes. And if you let them take over the game, it could be a very long day, right? That's what I want to see most in this game, right? I would like to see Alabama also assert their will running the football, right? I think Alabama, a lot of people were upset that Alabama had success running the ball against Vandy, but then they only had like 4 plays where it was back-to-back runs. A lot of that, again, the coaches said was because they were behind, but this is something that I want to definitely see. Is I think that Alabama has some opportunity to run the ball, especially with Jam Miller. He's been super explosive and really, really good all season. So that's what I want to see in this game, right? I want to see Alabama running the football. I want to see Alabama giving Jalen time to throw, because I think that from a wide receiver standpoint, I think that Nick Sheridan and Kalen DeBoer can definitely get those guys open. I would like to see if Kendrick Law is able to play in this game. He has been injured, and I know that the running game definitely benefits when he's in it. The passing game also benefits when he's in it. He's just such a good blocker, so good with the ball in his hands, right? So he's one that obviously I want to see if he's able to be back in this game. And then on the defensive end, I think the game plan is make Lenore Sellers beat you with his arm. Also, stay on top of Nick Harbor, right? Nick Harbor is their track star. He only has 7 receptions on the year, right? His receptions are not going to jump off the page. But part of their game plan is to try to get a deep ball, right? To try to bring you up and then get a deep ball over the top. Whether it be with Harbor or whether it be with other receivers, right? So your safeties are going to have to play very disciplined in making sure that they do not let anybody get over the top on them, because that's what South Carolina is going to try to do. They have Harbor as the track star. They have some other receivers that they try to go deep with as well. Vandarius Jacobs, has 4 receptions with an average of 26.8 yards a catch, right? That's the kind of thing. They're trying to go deep, right? They're trying to stretch the field. You just have to keep those guys in front of you. Again, I think Alabama has shown that ability to do such, but can they do it after a loss? That becomes the question. So my prediction for this game, I think Alabama does bounce back. I think that this is a wake-up call for Alabama. This is a situation where, I think a lot of people looked at the Alabama-Georgia game and saw how quickly you jumped on Georgia and were quick to crown that just because you don't have Nick Saban, Kalen DeBoer is just going to step in, never a problem, right? There's going to be some level of growing pains, right? It's a new coach. The players are good, but they're not the players he recruited, so that maybe they have a slightly different skill set than what they would ideally want, right? It's a new scheme. All of this, right? All of that to be said, this is a game which Alabama, must win, right? But also Alabama must show that they are the Alabama that we know they can be, right? They need to come out and they need to dominate this game and put the critics to rest and show we can absolutely win this game, and here's how we're going to do it, right? I think Alabama does win this game. I think that they do dominate and enforce their will. I trust in the offensive line's ability to give Jalen time to throw. I also trust in the ability of our defense to get a takeaway, potentially 2 from Lenore Sellers. I just don't think that he has the capability of beating you, right? When I talked about the Vandy game, Pavia scared me. He really did, right? He was the person I talked about in that preview. And turns out he beat us. I just don't see it out of Norris Sellers. He's a very good prospect, right? He's very raw. In the future, he will be very, very good, right? However, I don't think that's today, right? I don't think that today he's somebody that you can put the whole game on his shoulders and him be the one that beats you. So for that reason, I have Alabama 38, South Carolina 13. I think that Alabama comes out, wins this game. I think that they impose their will. I think that Alabama is able to get off the field on defense, make the adjustments that they weren't able to make this last week. And I think that Alabama does impose their will and win this game. And like I said, 38-13 is my prediction. As always, as I said, I will be breaking down this game no matter what happens. That breakdown will be happening on Monday. As I mentioned, I will try to get it out as early Monday morning as possible. My plan is if I can get in from my flight soon enough, I'm going to try to record Sunday night and have it ready to post at like 9 a.m. Monday morning. But we will have to see how that goes. But plan to watch the breakdown of that on Monday morning. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Check out my special edition episode that's going to come out on Friday, and I will catch you on the next episode. Peace.